You're listening to Football Friday Night on demand exclusively on 600 ESPN El Paso. Stay up to date with high school football scores, updates, and news by downloading the free 600 ESPN El Paso mobile app. Welcome in on the final episode of the Football Friday Night podcast on demand. Adrian Broaddus along with my co-host Alex Nicolas. We're back from a little bit of a hiatus, but we do have some news. Alex, I'm going to be volunteering you, man. Over the offseason, we're going to have some fun. We're going to do some off-season coverage as well. The 915 All-Star Combine in the Greater El Paso Football Showcase is right around the corner as well. But a trio of teams have advanced to the area round of the playoffs. That's why we got to do this. We got to bring you back for the podcast, Alex, and we got to talk all sorts of high school football, man. It's been a while, but I'm so happy to do this. How's everything going with you, man?
Hey, man, we're over here partying like it's 2014 with three teams returning to the regional semifinals. I mean, what a storybook season for sure. And it's not over yet. You know, we're going to talk about it. There's some teams with some chances. So maybe this isn't our last one for the season.
Yes.
Maybe we'll be back next week. Who knows?
I'm all for that, man. I like the positivity that you're saying right there. I said it's the last one. We got to keep going. We got to keep going on this. So I want to get to some storylines, some stats. But before we do any of that there, Alex, I need to ask you, when we started off this season, and you've covered high school football for a long time here in El Paso, when we started this season, did you anticipate a trio of teams advancing to the third round of the playoffs like we're seeing right now?
No, definitely not. I mean, you know, every year we sort of tier teams. You know, we look at them as district titles contenders. You know, we look at teams that are district titles sure, like for sure they're going to be district champs. And then we look at teams that could possibly make playoff runs. And if you ask me that, maybe 1-2 possible teams are in there. You know, Canofillo would have been one if you're asking me as far as, you know, playoff placement in their bracket. But definitely, I mean, you know, I'm looking at a team square like Eastwood. If you would have asked me after they got beat by Eastlake back on October 15th if they would be in the third round of the playoffs, you know, beating two really good teams, I would tell you no. But, you know, that's the beauty of high school football, and that's the beauty of each week. And really what is the Texas high school football playoffs is anybody can beat anybody to a certain point. And I think what we're seeing here are great matchups as far as, you know, teams where, you know, you're not playing the super teams like El Paso teams have. I'm talking about like Denton Ryan back in 2019. You know, you kind of been able to avoid those where the playing field is somewhat even. And, you know, these El Paso teams have taken big advantage of it. But what it does, more for me, what this is about, you know, coaching week to week, and credit to these coaches and these players for continuing to stick it out. You know, teams like Eastwood, even a team like Canofillo, who has an 11-1 record, but how well have the Eagles played, really, Adrian, since the middle of October? You know, could argue that they could beat any 6A team in town as well. So The coaching is getting better. The attention to detail is getting better, not only over the summer, but during the season. And I think that's a big credit to these coaches of all three of these teams that have just continued to grow their teams. And, you know, you look at even a team like Riverside, who's known for their offense coming into the season. Well, their defense is not very bad. Their defense is maybe could be argued as one of the better units right now on that team. So, you know, credit to these coaches for continuing to evolve their team. And I think that's one thing that we haven't seen in the past. You know, El Paso, when we have that Aaron Dumas, for instance, or that one good player, it seems to be revolved around them. Well, when you look at all three of these teams, they all have a star player, but coaches have been able to build around them, not only on the offensive side, which all three of those star players reside, but also defensively. And that's solid coaching, and that's what's going to help and give teams an advantage come these games where maybe you're disadvantaged from a talent perspective, but from a schematic perspective and from what you've been evolving. You know, you come out there and you're really hard to prepare for. And I think that's what we're seeing with these three teams so far in the playoffs.
So before we get into the round of 16, as we're talking about right now for all three of Riverside, Eastwood, and Canutillo, I got to ask you, Alex, from the first two rounds of the playoffs thus far, by-district round and area round, what has been your biggest surprise? I'll give you mine first. My biggest surprise was seeing Parkland upset Austin in the by-district round and advance it to the playoffs. they had a very, very arduous test against Lubbock Cooper last week in the area round. But I felt like that really gives you momentum if you're Parkland going into next year with a younger squad. You have running back Isaiah Beasley. You have the offensive tackle in Tyrone McDuffie. And you also have, of course, their sophomore quarterback Eric Ortiz. And I think I buried the lead here, DJ Chris Daniels. What a standout wideout he is. That's one of the teams that really surprised me, at least in the bi-district round of the playoff.
I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you one real quick that's in that same 5A Division II. Horizons upset win over Burgess. I mean, wow.
Great one.
What a pinnacle for the career of Ernie Garcia and Jacob Cuijas. I mean, that right there to me is a program-changing win for Horizon. Of course, those two kids graduate. But that's something that will always be remembered there. Honestly, I'm going to kind of keep on a team that's alive the way that Riverside handled themselves in the playoffs. A 34-7 win over Big Spring. They were up on Lake Worth early in that game. Lake Worth was able to fight back, and Riverside held them off there in the last couple of minutes. But Riverside is doing the exact same formula that they did during the regular season, albeit they're not going to run the score up on teams 70-0 or 59-12 like they did during district play. But that's very impressive to see Angel Munoz have the same success in the playoffs that he's having during the regular season in terms of their power run game with him and his big play ability. That, to me, is something special and something that, we knew Riverside had that talent, as far as Angel Munoz, but what it manifests in the playoffs to the level that it's been. And I think that's really what's been a really big surprise for me, an exciting surprise more than anything, because this team really has a legitimate chance going forward. But, shout out to Horizon, though. That was one of the bigger upsets, just like you mentioned with that Parkland upset. I mean, those are 1A, 1B. In terms of some of the big in-town upsets that we had in that bi-district round.
Well, it's a perfect segue right here. You talking about Angel Speedy Munoz to us talking about Saturday's matchup. Let's start with the 4A ranks. The Riverside Rangers take on the Springtown Porcupines. I can't get past this, man. That logo, that helmet, the Porcupines, that is such a cool logo. Before we get into this actual game.
Yeah, I mean, I kept saying porcupines to myself all day Monday listening to the radio broadcast. So it's another one of those, traditional schools from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They've been playing football there for a while. Very impressed with the way that they were able to overcome that game against Andrews. I mean, this is a very young team. Their starting running back, Matthew Lockhart, over 1,000 yards. He's really the lone senior on that team that's really putting up the production that you would think. Their quarterback, a sophomore, Hudson Hewitt, just under 2,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He can also run the ball. He has 9 rushing touchdowns and averages 5.3 yards per carry. This is a very tough matchup here for Riverside. But the way I look at it is that this game could be a shootout. I really see this game being a very high-scoring game. If I'm setting the over-under in this game, I'm looking at about 76.5, and that's very generous.
Nice.
I think both teams can really move the ball. It's going to come down to turnovers, and that's going to be kind of a theme. I may sound like a broken record as we break down these 3 games because turnovers always turn the tide in playoff games. And I think that's really going to be the key because that's what Conotheo does. Or excuse me, not Conotheo. We'll get to Conotheo here shortly. That's what Riverside does. You're looking at one point of the season, Adrian, they had 28 turnovers, 28 takeaways, that is. And then same thing if you look at Springtown, they have 27 takeaways. So these teams, to me, look very evenly matched in terms of what they do. Obviously, Springtown's going to throw the ball just a little bit more than Riverside is. Riverside may want to control the ball a little bit, but Riverside has big playability, not only with Angel Munoz, like we mentioned, but with Jose Guardado back there as well. And I think this one could really, really turn into a track meet. This is going to be the epitome of a big time playoff game with some great offensive players and some intrigue there. And of course, both of these quarterbacks are underclassmen, so you're talking about some inexperience there. Now, for Springtown, looking at their sort of recent playoff history, this is no stranger to them. Looking at really where they've been over the past couple of years, this has been they've been in this round pretty consistently here. So as far as the big lights, when you get into that aspect of the game, as far as the big game, where have you been? Have you been here before? This is now the 3rd straight year that Springtown has made it past the 3rd round. They 2019 they made it all the way to the state semifinals, lost to Waco La Vega. Last year they lost to Canyon 17-14 in this round. So this team knows what it is or what it takes to be at this level. At least in recent history. And we all know, for Riverside, this is the first time Riverside's been this far, really since I would say 2004. I may be mistaken there. But that I also look into that as a factor as well. In terms of the coaching staff, and that's what I really think. You're looking at playoff experience versus a very talented team. It's going to be a crazy game. I throw out experience a little bit with Riverside just because of how good Angel Munoz is. And I think it's getting to the point, Adrian, where Angel Munoz is just that good to expect 3 or 4 touchdowns, 200 rushing games consistently, no matter who it is that he's going up against. And I think that's advantage Riverside if things go his way.
All right, let's break down both teams a little bit more. You talked about Springtown. They're coming off a 43-33 victory against Andrews last week. Springtown is ranked number 20 in the Texas 4A Division I ranks. So they're 20th overall. Their head coach, Brian Hullett, their quarterback, his son, Hudson Hullett, he had 192 passing yards last week in the win against Andrews, 2 touchdowns. They also like to balance a ground game going too, so they can kind of do it all when you're talking about Springtown. Now, flipping it on the other side with Riverside, I'm going to give you 2 of the most eye-popping stats from last week's win against Lake Worth, which, by the way, was a grind. It was an absolute grind for the Riverside Rangers. It was Angel Speedy Munoz, what are we going to call him? The city's future offensive MVP, the current, just call him the city MVP right now. 126 passing yards, 262 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns against Lake Worth. But defensively, you like the defensive stats, Alex. Here, I'm going to throw this one at you. Adrian Estrada, 13 tackles, a forced fumble against Lake Worth. I mean, that defense can really get it done, too.
They really can get it done. And Rudy Valenzuela is another one of those top defensive players. And one thing that gets a little bit under credit is their defensive line. They run an odd front out there, too. And another angle to look at this game, Lake Worth and Springtown, they're district opponents. And you're looking at Lake Worth put it on Springtown on October 8th, 48-19. And that's the team that Riverside beat last week if you're into score comparison. So you could sort of see, the sort of the vulnerability of Springtown in a sense with those tremendous stats on both sides of the ball, Riverside. So, even though, the rest of the state may look at Riverside as an underdog in this one, I would put a line about Riverside 4.5, Riverside 5 points in this one, just based off scores, based off the stats that we bring up. I mean, very similar, but I'm really starting to believe, like I mentioned, that Angel Munoz is really just that next level player that we're seeing. That he's, you always talk. I always joke when I would cover UTEP football about the WAR stat. That's a baseball stat, but wins above replacement. I think you can start counting that for Angel Munoz. Maybe he's worth 5 points a game if he steps on the field. And I think when you're looking at an even matchup that this one is now, even though I compared a score from the early October, these teams are pretty much dead even. But that Angel Munoz factor to me, give me a WAR of 5.5 for him. And that's where I really feel like Riverside can be the favorite in this game. But again, turnovers, that's a big deal. If you give them momentum, especially in a playoff game where it's neutral, the stakes are a little bit higher. Your reaction to that turnover may be a little bit different than it would be in that October 8th game. That's really what kind of concerns me as far as Riverside's inexperience compared to where Springtown's been the past couple of years. And I'm sure there's plenty of players that have been around both of those playoff runs in 2019 and 2020 for Springtown. But, Angel Munoz, man, we could do a whole hour podcast about how good this kid is, and he just continues to improve each week out.
Let's move along and talk a little bit about the Canutillo Eagles and what they were able to do last week against Randall, another tough opponent, 27-24, grinding out that win. It was a tough one for them, and it looked like Randall was really going to come back late in that game, but Canutillo was able to hold on strong and win that game thanks to their standout running back, L.J. Martin, the junior, 259 on the ground, a pair of rushing touchdowns. Now on the season, Alex, he has 2,592 rushing rushing yards, which I just love right there for the Canutillo tailback. And again, I'm going to bring up two more defensive guys, and it's the Carrillo brothers. I don't know why we haven't talked about this as far as the storyline goes. Freshman Edward Carrillo in this game against, against Randall, he had 11 tackles, co-led the team. He had a whopping five pass breakups in this game. And then his brother, Chuy Carrillo, 11 tackles as well. They're the two co-leaders in total tackles in that game, and he forces a fumble. So I love these guys, not only because they're monsters on the field, but Edward Carrillo is just a freshman. Chuy Carrillo is just a junior.
Yeah, I mean, man, these guys just continue to get better. That's what's really, really impressed me about both of those kids and that Canutillo defense all year long is how much better they've gotten just week to week. And we knew that, even that game against Eastlake where they took one on the chin against Eastlake, I think that was really a turning point to that game because a turning point to their season. And not only that, another turning point would be that overtime win against Del Valle. Those kids really grew up in that game, especially Chuy Carrillo, who is probably the 5A Division II or the 5A where they're D1 or the 5A D2 1-5A district player of the year in terms of defense. I mean, this kid really has the talent to do that. He has the stats to do it. And you're looking at the younger Carrillo, just a freshman, making the impact that he's made. This Canutillo team, and not to look ahead, but they're going to be good for the next 2 or 3 years. There's no doubt about it. This is sort of a foundation year for them to what's to come. And those two players on that defensive end are catalysts of that. And it's been really fun to watch this team just continually get better. Scott Brooks and his staff, I know his defensive coordinator has been there for a long time. And it just, that continuity, that trust that they have in each other in terms of everybody on that defense. And another guy that really has stood out to me as well, Abel Gallardo Perez, he has over 83 tackles at the outside linebacker spot. Those backers for that Canutillo defense make things go. That front three creates havoc. Those backers are there every time. They're never out of place. They're sound. They're in a good athletic position. They tackle well. They understand their run fits in terms of what they're trying to do and what they're reading defensively. And the mental aspect, to me, of how strong this team has gotten, especially last week, holding down what I felt was maybe one of the more explosive passing games that we've seen out of a Randall team in a while. And they pretty much held them down for most of that game, holding them to a couple of field goals, really, when Randall needed a touchdown. That was key to me, is to see the Canutillo defense step up the way they did in the thick of that game when Randall, all they needed was a score to get back into the game, and the Canutillo defense held tough. So that's what's been impressive about that defensive unit, is just their commitment to improvement and their commitment to excellence, and that is a Raider Oakland or Las Vegas Raider reference there.
I like it right there. Canutillo, just like Riverside, plays at Midland Grande Communications Stadium. It's a Friday kickoff of 3 o'clock. Alex Nicolas will have the coverage for us on 600 ESPN El Paso as part of Football Friday Night. Wanted to talk to you about Ryder. I need to get the breakdown from Ryder from you. They're number 14 in 5A Division II. They beat Andress last week, 37-13, and they were probably the only team on Lubbock Cooper's schedule who gave them a really good game. It was a 20-12 finish, the closest game all year pretty much for Lubbock Cooper. And in this one, Alex, it should be a great one as Canutillo tries to top Ryder. Give me the latest on this team.
Yeah, your typical Ryder team, big, physical. They have a tremendous defensive line, maybe one of the best defensive lines in this Region 1 bracket for sure. And then they have a budding star in Anquan Willis, who I actually saw as a freshman against Andress 3 years ago, had a big coming out game. Well, now he's a junior. He's getting looked at by Texas Tech. He'll probably end up being a Red Raider. They also have another good defensive lineman. He's more. They have a lot of guys running both ways, but Jordan Gibbs is another guy that I heard his name called time and time again from the defensive line spot. This is a team that's very balanced in what they do. Very, very balanced in terms of what they do. They have guys that can run the ball on you. They can throw short screens. But what stands out to me is the physicality of this team. And I think that's really what's the better matchup, I guess you can say, in this game is who's going to be more physical, because it's going to be one of those slobber knockers. I mean, no doubt about it. As good as this Ryder team has been in the past, the only disadvantage is that they had a super team with a really good quarterback and a group of tremendous skill players. Well, all those guys graduated, so they've really had to put things together in terms of their offense to get offense really kind of piece them back together. So that's something that they've been working on all year long. And I think Canutillo has just that slight advantage because Canutillo has the LJ Martins of the world, you know what I mean, that are out here producing. So, it's going to be one of those games that's just won at the line of scrimmage, in terms of who can run the ball. That's really what it's going to be to me. And then Jordan Gibbs, slowing down Jordan Gibbs and Quan Willis. Those are going to be two big-time players. And, of course, Jack Pitts, our quarterback's another guy he's a junior, first year in the program starting. Been in the program, obviously, but his first year as a starter. He really got off to a hot start last week. So, for Canutillo, they're going to have their hands full not only with the physicality of Ryder, but when you have those two very, very dynamic athletes out of the backfield in Jordan Gibbs and Anquan Willis.
Let's talk a little bit about the Eastwood Troopers. And before we even break down their game against Saginaw Boswell, we mentioned it before. We'll say it again. I think I counted out this team. I was checked out after the Pebble Hills game, and all credit to Julio Lopez. All credit to senior quarterback Andrew Martinez. Look, they talked about it before the season even started, Alex. They knew that this was a senior group of guys that wanted to win now, and they understood that this was their window right here. Win this year and do it with this special bunch. They weren't able to win necessarily the games they needed to in district play, but maybe the momentum that they gained at the end of the season helped propel them for the playoffs and kind of hey, we don't have anything to lose. They're going into this one with nothing to lose, and I like that mentality right there. And Eastwood, hey, it all matters in November. If you're playing deep in November, it doesn't matter what kind of district record you finished off in or what you finished off in 6A as far as the standings go. For this Eastwood Troopers team, they're going to ride that momentum that they went too deep in the playoffs. And for Julio Lopez, for this team, for the Troopers and the squad, I'm just real happy for them that they're able to get to this point.
Talking about, getting better as the season goes on, I mean, that's definitely what you're seeing with Eastwood. And, not only that, but I think we got to start giving the credit that is deserved to Andrew Martinez. He's been a consistent athlete, just a consistent performer really since his sophomore year, since he's gone onto the scene. And you look at what he's done this year, obviously going to pass 4,000-yard passing, which I believe, I got to look that up. He could be very close to Mark Torres' record, former Eastwood quarterback as well under Julio Lopez. I'll try to pull that up right now. But, that kid deserves a lot of the credit as far as what this team is doing. And, I said it before on this podcast. I've said it a lot. In high school football, if you have one of these special quarterbacks, which Andrew Martinez has been since his sophomore year, you're going to have a chance. You're really going to have a chance. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Not only can this kid throw the ball at a high level, but when they need a first down on the ground, when they need that inside the 10-yard line touchdown, he's going to deliver. And I think that's really what's starting to become a consistent thing for him. It's just his opportunity to deliver. And not so looking at these stats here, when you look at who's the all-time leader in terms of passing yards in the city, that would be A.J. Briggs, 4,777 yards. And you look at Mr. Martinez, 3,921 yards. Of course, games, I believe Briggs only played 12 games that year. So, but hey, what's the goal? The goal is to play 16 games every season, right? So, that just shows how special that this kid is. Not only is he up there in the upper echelon of Eastwood quarterbacks, but I'd put him up there against the upper echelon of quarterbacks we've seen in the city, and that goes up there with the Ed Stanberries and the Stephen and Raymond Montez. And this kid's special. He's really special, and he gets an opportunity to continue building on that. With a very, very formidable opponent, though, in this next round.
So, Mark Torres, senior year, 3,837 passing yards. So now you can really compare those numbers with a guy like Andrew Martinez, and I really like that, the fact that... So where did Mark Torres end up? That's my question to you, Alex. Where did he end up in that all-time list?
He was leading it for a while. He had the record for a while, and then A.J. Briggs, that big year that he had, I want to say that was Hankins' junior year. Right. That's when Briggs really had that year where they were just chucking it around with that 4,000-yard passing season.
So is it fair to say that Andrew Martinez is now second in the city?
Yeah, no, as of right now, he's second. You know, like I said, 4,077. That's what
Wow.
Briggs had. So yeah, he's pretty. And I mean, the pace of that Eastwood offense. I mean, what we're going to give him maybe over under 6-minute mark of the second quarter to pass that. I mean, that I'm not a big mathematician, but that's maybe less than 100 yards that he has to throw to break that, or a little bit more than 100 yards.
No one's talking about this, Alex. This has not been talked about this week.
It just hit me right now when I looked at his total numbers, and I knew that AJ Briggs was the only 4,000. I knew that Torres had that 3,000-yard season, but it slipped my mind until I pulled up the record book right now with AJ Briggs. So, you know, we're talking about a kid that just really, I mean, you're looking at his career stats. I mean, Andrew Hernandez has done this, or Andrew Martinez, excuse me, has done this since his sophomore year, since he's taken over. So, I mean, you know, this kid. And I saw somebody tweet it out, and it wasn't one of us guys in El Paso. It was somebody from across the state that says that this kid's under-recruited, and there's no doubt. I mean, you're looking at his numbers this year, just numbers alone, 779 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. We talked about the passing game, but or his passing numbers. But the fact that he's winning games, I mean, that to me, you know, they say QB wins isn't a stat. Baloney. I am a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in your quarterback, especially at the high school level. You have that quarterback, you're going to have an opportunity. And that's what we've really seen with not only Andrew Martinez, but with Eastwood. And I talked to you about it off air about, you know, why Eastwood has success over the past couple of years. Maybe not so much these deep playoff runs, but they've given some teams some fits in the playoffs because of their offense, because of their quarterback play. Give me good quarterback play. I want that team's going to have an opportunity in each game, and I think that's what we're seeing here with the Eastwood program under Julio Lopez.
Alex, this is really awesome stuff. I almost want to share this, but I don't want to psych the kid out. So maybe we just do it after the fact, and we just say, I'll throw it in my story or something like that. I'll credit this podcast, but I definitely don't want to psych this kid out. If it was like Jacob Cowing, you know, and his opportunity to try to break career milestones or single season milestones, sure, he's a college player and he wants to go pro. He's got to, you know, face this at some point. But maybe for Andrew Martinez, we won't psych him out yet. How about that?
Yeah, maybe we could wait until like they're about to start the game when they're on the field. Maybe we'll tweet that out like Saturday, like at 11 o'clock where they don't see it, and then they could retweet it after the game. You know, once he breaks the record. So yeah, we should keep that one definitely away. We don't want to hit the psyche. We want the win. We want them to be able to win next week to add to that record.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you on that completely. Let's talk about this game. Prosper is number 34 in the state of Texas. They're number 19 in 6A. Prosper is a team who beat Grand Prairie 58-13. They had 559 total yards of offense in that game. And when I was looking at Prosper, I kind of thought, man, this actually kind of looks like Eastwood. You know, they run that kind of they like to spread the ball across the field. They really like to, move the ball in kind of an air raid system, but they do balance it out in a ground attack. They're very balanced, a lot through the air and a lot on the ground. That 559 was pretty much evenly split in the passing and running game. But this Prosper team looks pretty tough, especially what they were able to do to Grand Prairie last week.
Yeah, you're talking about a team that's battle tested from the Dallas area. I mean, just look at their, just look at their schedule. You know, you play South Lake Carroll, your third game of the season, you get shut out. But how about this? They beat Allen University, October 29, 28-23, which I don't think Allen had lost a district game. Man, I'd have to let me go back and I think they hadn't lost two games in a regular season since 2005, and Allen was ranked at that point. So that in itself just shows you where this team is. Harrison Rosar is their quarterback. Obviously, just like we talked about Andrew Martinez, the kid is in the same mold. Those Dallas-Fort Worth quarterbacks are just really, really something else. And, that win, I think, really propelled them when they beat Allen, because what that did is that got them into the playoffs. And, of course, next week they end up losing to a really good McKinney Boyd team. But, nonetheless, you're talking about a team that's battle-tested, a team that's played two of the top programs in recent history and not in high school football history. That to me is always tough. That's always tough going against these Dallas teams. They're fast. They're big. They have depth. Some of these teams have a three deep depth chart with, where the three is just as equally as good as the one. That's what you run into when you run into these Dallas teams, and that's what really worries me about this Eastwood game. But again, Eastwood's ability to put up points has been impressive, but I don't know if this defense has seen an offense as explosive as Prosper's, and that's where, being able to make those key stops early on in the game and not find yourself down 14-0 where you're chasing points, even though that is sort of Eastwood's MO, playing from behind, playing those helter-skelter type of crazy games. That is what Eastwood likes to do. So, it's almost a toss-up in that sense when you look at what the game could turn into be. But, when I look at Prosper and what they've done, just their body of work on their schedule, you would think they would be a double-digit favorite. But, again, we've counted out Eastwood a few times this year, and I think Coach Lopez has made that known pretty publicly about people that are doubting them. So, hey, if it's working, I'm going to keep doubting Eastwood, and if they come out, I'll eat my crow. But, I mean, you just those Dallas-Fort Worth teams, from those districts up there, I mean, just looking at their looking really at those districts 4 and 5 of what type of football and the schedule that they have, they're ready at this point. There's no wide-eyed, bushy tails, all that stuff. These kids are ready to go. Eastwood's going to be in that same mold too. I think the confidence that Coach Lopez has instilled in his team during this playoff run, it's worth a point or two when you're talking about, on paper predictions. But, to me, I would think Prosper would be a double-digit favorite. But again, Eastwood, they could put up points, man. This is a very, very interesting game. I'm really looking forward to seeing the halftime score on this one, Adrian. How close is Eastwood at halftime, to be able to make that run, or are they going to have to continue playing from behind, or, hey, did Eastwood just jump out and take a lead? That's going to be the first half of that ball game is going to be very, very important for Eastwood to be able to jump out or keep themselves within striking distance, because to me, if Eastwood's within 2 scores, they're still in the ball game. Can they limit their mistakes on offense and prevent the big play? The big play, I think that's what Prosper is going to go into this game banking on. And if they can limit those two, Eastwood's going to be in this game.
Over under, how many times Julio Lopez goes for it on 4th down?
I would go 3.5. This is a game where they're going to be in a lot of those situations. I think, and I just said it on the Rojo Network podcast before I jumped on here. The playoffs, sometimes it goes down to those 4th and 3 situations from the opponent's 40. 4th and 2 from just inside midfield, and you're down a score, and you need to keep the offense going, and maybe you've gotten a few first downs, and those are going to be the decisions and the executions that I think Eastwood's going to face, no doubt about it. And we always joke about Julio Lopez going for it on 4th down, but I think in the 3rd round of the playoffs, that gets magnified more, especially if you're down in the game. You need to show confidence in your team and build some confidence on that sideline. So, yeah, I would think those situations are going to come up a lot, especially in a very close game, which this one could be early on.
He's Alex Nicolas. He covers football and high school football sports with us here on Football Friday Night. He joins me as my co-host every time we do our Football Friday Night podcast on demand. Alex, I can't thank you enough for all your great work this season. I can't wait for the rest of this season. Like you said, this isn't over. We're continuing, and we got to catch up after this crazy week, and then hopefully we talk again next week to preview another round of the playoffs.
Oh yeah, man! There's nothing like driving out to the Midland area during Thanksgiving during this high school football playoff time every year. You guys can follow me on Twitter at NicolasAlex915. I'll have up-to-date stats, up-to-the-minute stats, updates, and all that good stuff, player interviews and stuff out there from Midland. So I'm excited, man. Can't wait to hit the road, but we got to eat some turkey first, man. So happy Thanksgiving to yourself and your family, AJ.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, Alex. I really appreciate it again, and we'll talk to you next week, all right?
Go El Paso.